Hey guys, welcome back to a brand new video, and in today's video we will be talking about the 2024 presidential election. I guess, obviously this is a Romney versus Biden matchup, but the overarching theme, or overarching, I probably butchered that, but the theme here is, can a traditionalist or I guess, anti-Trump, more moderate-esque Republican, can they defeat Joe Biden? In a hypothetical 2024 election matchup. So I don't think that Romney is going to be the nominee, first of all. Second, I think that well, just yeah, I'm just gonna put that out there. Romney has like a less than 1% chance of being the GOP nominee in 2024. So I just want to put that out there. So let's actually hop right into it with our safe states for Joe Biden in this scenario. I don't think I think Colorado would I think actually Romney would do well enough in the suburbs to make it just unlikely, but just put it as likely. It's almost safe. Um, you're going to see a similar thing with Virginia, and I'm just going to put this likely because I already talked about Virginia. Romney would do well enough in the Virginia suburbs in that he'd be able to prevent Joe Biden from running it up completely in the Fairfax, D.C. suburbs, and that he make it closer than Trump made it in 2020. And then Colorado, I just think the Denver suburbs, they're trending blue, but I think Romney would do good enough to make it under 12%. So, yeah. Romney, he'd probably carry Utah safe. I mean, he's from there. He's pretty popular in Utah. He wouldn't carry Minnesota safe. That'd be stupid. Nebraska, he'd carry safe. Kansas, the Kansas suburbs really actually swung against Trump. I mean, Biden actually won the Kansas suburban vote by like 1% in 2020. And I think the Romney would do well enough. He'd kind of win it by like 15 to 16%, and improve on Trump's numbers in Kansas. Maybe not in the rural part of the state, but in the certainly more so in the suburban part of the state and in the Kansas City, Topeka area. He wouldn't carry Indiana safe, but he'd carry some of these southern states safe. So 91 safe electoral votes for Romney, 199 for Biden. Biden would also carry New Mexico by a likely margin. I already mentioned Colorado and Virginia. I think that New Mexico could be closer because I think that Romney would do better with the libertarian vote than Trump. Romney is just much more libertarian than Trump. Obviously, I guess Trump is not a libertarian Republican. He's far from it, but I think that like the Gary Johnson voters who kind of either voted for Joe Jorgensen this year or went for Biden. Obviously, a lot of Gary Johnson voters went for Trump, but the ones who voted for Jorgensen or Biden would go for Romney more so than they did for Trump, I guess, because Romney's more of a libertarian Republican than Trump is. And I also think that Biden. Oh, I forgot Hawaii is safe. And I also am going to say that Biden would carry Minnesota by a likely margin. I think that Minnesota is. First of all, Minnesota is a left-wing populist state, and that populist Democrats or Democrats who run campaigns based on, I guess, dignity of work type, they do very well in Minnesota. Minnesota is a lean Democratic state, but Biden did well enough in the Minneapolis suburbs to offset for his bad performance in the rural part of the state. But I think a populist Democrat, or even a populist Democrat or a Democrat running against a very corporate I guess, corporatist Republican could do well enough in the rural part of the state to build on to it, to even maybe, Biden would probably do worse in the Minneapolis suburbs because, as we know, Romney is a better candidate for the suburban part of the state, but Biden would still do better in the rural part of the state, so it would be a likely margin of victory for Joe Biden. Romney also lost the state by a likely margin to Obama in 2012, so, we'd see a kind of similar thing, I guess. I'm actually not going to peg New Hampshire as likely, and I'll discuss that in a second. So 219 electoral votes for Biden, likely in Maine. We always go over Maine. How it's never, it's pretty solid for the Democrats, but it's not a 12-point margin of victory for them. I think that Romney would carry Alaska by a likely margin. He'd probably carry Missouri and Indiana by a likely margin. And I forgot the second district, Nebraska would be likely. He'd also win South Carolina by a likely margin. He'd probably carry, I don't know. I mean, Iowa, I'm on the fence, but I'll put it as likely because of Biden's, he had a uniquely awful performance in Iowa. He did not do as well in the rural areas of the state as I thought he would do. He did horribly with white voters there. I mean, Trump is a good candidate for the white working class and non-college educated white voters like in Iowa. And I do think that Romney would underperform Trump, but still, Iowa, in a state that's trending blue, that's trending red as fast as Iowa, I don't think that Biden would do well enough with white voters there to make it under 5% margin of victory for Romney. Missouri and Indiana, these are obviously pretty solid states for the Republican Party, but Trump did well enough with the working class and rural voters in both these states to make them barely safe states. I think Romney just wouldn't do as well with these voter demographics to make them likely. South Carolina is just a likely Republican state for right now. We've talked about this before. It's it depends on black turnout. It can get really close if black turnout is if the black vote is a good share of the electorate. If not, then I guess it can be a bigger margin of victory for the GOP. But these southern states are more traditionalist, I guess. But either way, South Carolina is going to be a likely Republican state in 2024, probably. Alaska, you see a similar thing with Alaska. I think the third party vote would go down. The Libertarians would come out for Romney, but he also wouldn't get the same, I guess, energy from the. I mean, maybe he would actually. I'll put Alaska as safe because I think he could do well enough with the oil-focused voters in Anchorage to win the state. So yeah, and then I also do think that Biden. Yeah, I think Biden would carry Nevada by a lean margin. I was debating putting likely, and I think that we can like dive into Nevada to a certain extent. I think first of all, Romney would run behind Trump in the rural part of the state. Trump made a big focus on the rural part of the state. I mean, he'd like. I'd expect Romney to just do worse generally in the rural part of the state. He might do a little better in Washoe County, which is where Reno is. It's the second largest county in the state, so I think Washoe could potentially, be under 3% margin of victory for Joe Biden. But I don't see Biden doing poorly enough in Clark for Romney to flip the state or make it super close. So I think Biden would probably carry the state by 3 or 4. He'd also actually no, never mind. But Biden would probably carry the Rust Belt by a lean margin and give him the victory here narrowly. I guess I think Pennsylvania could be really close, but I think that Romney, even though Romney is more more conservative socially, and a lot of these a lot of these non-college educated white voters are, I guess, they're conservative enough socially to consider voting for a Republican. But Romney's economic policy has just no appeal to these voters, and they'd come home for Biden the way that they did for Obama in 2012 against Mitt Romney. Donald Trump Donald Trump is a populist, and he still lost these states to Joe Biden. So that's why I think the Biden would probably carry them. He'd actually probably carry Michigan by a likely margin now that I think about it, because Michigan is a state that Biden did carry. He won Michigan by 3%. So I think that he could make it. He could probably do better in Michigan, to be honest, than I originally anticipated. So yeah, and then New Hampshire I think would be a lean margin of victory for Biden. I don't know why I forgot the president of the United States name, but I think he'd carry New Hampshire by a bit closer, because New England Republicans, New England likes moderate Republicans. I mean, like I can probably go state by state and name moderates who win. Collins, Sununu, Scott, Baker, Pataki in New York, I guess. But, being realistic here, Trump was a bad candidate for New England. I don't know why there was a lot of hype about Trump potentially winning New Hampshire. But either way, he was a horrible candidate for this region. Romney, being the former governor of Massachusetts, having more of a moderate reputation, could do better in New Hampshire. So that's why I didn't put it as likely and put it as lean. Now, for the lean Romney states, I think he'd carry Arizona by a lean margin. Texas by a lean margin. He'd carry. I think he'd do well enough in because Texas he'd probably switch. Like Trump did poorly in suburbs, but he did very well in the Rio Grande Valley area. RGV, we'll call it that. I think that Romney wouldn't do any better than Trump in the RGV, but he'd do probably well enough in the suburbs to make this like a 4 or 5 point win for him here. But the Hispanic population in Texas is growing, so you do about the same as Trump with every demographic. But since Hispanics are growing, and since they're still a decent category for Biden, he'd still probably carry them or carry Texas. Texas would narrow up. Excuse me. Florida, I think Biden would do, or Romney would do well enough in like Miami-Dade County. He wouldn't do as well as Trump did, but he'd do well enough in Miami-Dade and Broward and Palm Beach. He'd probably also hold on to Duval, which is a controversial take, but the suburbs of Jacksonville are pretty conservative, and I think Romney would just do well enough there to hold off Biden and Duval. Same with Tampa area, so I think Romney would do well enough in upstate to hold off Biden, I guess, making minor gains in Miami. So, yeah, and then he'd also carry Ohio and Maine, second district by lean margins. These are districts that on one hand are states and districts that on one hand are trending to the right politically, but they're also, these are only really good performances for Trump because he had appealed to rural voters in a way that Romney, McCain, and even George W. Bush did not. So, yeah. But the country's too polarized for these states to revert back to, I guess, democratic states, especially in 2024. So I think Romney would carry both those states. So it's going to come down to the Sun Belt. Well, actually, Biden already won, but I think the Sun Belt. These are only very close. I'm kind of torn on these, but I'm just going to say that we're going to see the exact same electoral map. Literally the exact same electoral map, except the population shifts into the red states. So, yeah, I think Arizona would stay tilt D because Romney do well enough in the Maricopa suburbs to hold off Biden's gains with Hispanics and just, I guess, inner city Phoenix, Tucson voters. Georgia would just stay. Actually, I'll give Georgia to Romney. I think Georgia it can be really close. But I think Romney just do well enough in the Atlanta. Like Romney did so well in the Atlanta suburbs that no matter how well Obama did in the Atlanta area, he just was able to really do and win the state by a pretty good margin for a Republican candidate just by doing well enough in the suburbs of Atlanta. So I think Romney do well enough in the suburbs to carry the state of Georgia, and then North Carolina I think would definitely just stay. It would be really close for sure. But I think Romney do like I've always said. The overarching theme of this video has been that Romney would do well enough in the suburbs to carry these states. So you flip Georgia, that's it. But again, guys, thanks so much for watching this video. I'm kind of in a rush if you can't tell. So thank you for watching. Like, subscribe. I'll see you all in the next one. Goodbye.